Cate Blanchett can project a striding presence from the stage and a meticulous subtlety from the screen. After her fellow Australian Bruce Beresford directed her in Paradise Road, she was on her way to the throne of England as a believably regal Elizabeth. I was equally impressed to find that in real life she was quick and funny, like Carole Lombard reborn. Well, when I saw you do Elizabeth, I thought, she could really do a screwball comedy, because Elizabeth was a natural screwball comedian.
You got that. No one else has got that.
She could do the lines.
She could.
And if someone wrote movies like that for you, you could do them. But here you are brought up on horror movies. I just want to imagine you at the age of 6 watching these horror movies. Why weren't you scared shitless?
No, I used to read this terrible series of books that you could buy at Safeway called Trixie Belden books. Trixie Belden books, and she had her best friend Honey Wheeler, and they used to go on adventures. So I spent all my childhood on a bike, trucking around the suburbs, writing notes on all the neighbours and inventing scenarios. And the only way my parents could get me indoors was to put on the Sherlock Holmes films. And every year we'd have a pool party and we'd watch various versions of Halloween 1, 2 to 27.
So you're really a detective.
At heart. And Nancy Drew was the other one. Right. Have you read her? Phenomenal.
Yeah, a little bit, but because my own kids were into some of this kind of stuff too. I caught up with a lot of things. When there are children around the house, you catch up with things like Beatrix Potter, which I never knew anything about. There's a set of horror stories for you.
Yeah.
Piglets going down to the yard and getting beaten senseless. I never knew all that was happening.
Yeah.
Which Sherlock Holmes was this?
The one I really remember was, I can't remember the name of it exactly, but it
wasn't Basil Rathbone, the old, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah? But the one he was in was, I think it was called The Case of the Golden Claw, and he was staying up in the moors in Scotland, and there was this person going around murdering people with a garden trowel and scraping out their throats. So that was a big one for me.
And you
that
wrote
was
all
my
this down
favourite.
in your book, right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
And then you cycle around the district looking for other instances of the Golden Claw.
I discovered a few. Yeah.
Well, it's good training for an actress pretending to be a detective.
Oh, no, I wasn't pretending I was.
But you weren't making notes on the performances. You weren't one of these analytical. There was. Like our mutual friend Beresford, for example, when he was very, very young, was taking notes on the movies, which camera angles and all that stuff. You weren't taking notes on how people acted or something. You weren't a natural actor in that sense.
No, I mean, I think Bruce is a natural filmmaker. I mean, he just does it. It comes out of every pore in his body. Whereas I think for me, I love being an audience, and I want to get immersed in something. I don't like to see the technique. I mean, I obviously, in really good performances, it's absolutely there, but it's submerged. And that's why the Swedes are so incredible. You look at the female performers who, like Lena Andre and Liv Ullmann.
Liv Ullmann fan, huh?
Oh, massive.
You see yourself working for Bergman, being repressed by this powerful personality of his?
Well, I have to get in soon, I think. But yeah, absolutely.
He's getting on.
Yeah. But they're really, then Pernilla August, they're incredible. And you know that they've absolutely run the gamut of every sort of emotional possibility. They've done their homework in that way, but it's a river, their performances, and so that's what I like. And even with someone like Bette Davis, you watch her work, and it just erupts from a place that is particular to her. So she's, it's you're not watching the cogs turning.
When I was young and watching her, I thought I could see the cogs turning in the sense that she emoted on screen in a way.
She's large. She's really large, but I mean, I think that's her style.
She belted it in the way that my favourites, like Irene Dunne and Rosalind Russell and all these fast-talking babes, didn't do. I love the way they just did it with the words.
But the
Barbara
words were there.
Yeah, but the words were there. Yeah, they had the stuff to say.
Yeah.
We can't really tell if those Swedish actresses are speaking good Swedish, can we?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult. I trust them.
What about Australian actors speaking good English? When you were starting off, did you have to have elocution classes or all that sort of stuff?
You mean training it?
Yeah, because when I was very young, Australian actors had a continuing problem, whether they stayed in Australia or whether they were abroad, of how they would actually sound on stage. Because the middle-class audience for theatre wanted them to sound English, not like Aussies. So
well, I mean, when I went to drama school, obviously varying degrees of people. Like people in my year with stronger and weaker sort of so-called Australian accents. And I sort of don't have a particularly strong one. Not that it's a stigma or anything, although sometimes I think, the English can make you feel like it is.
I nowadays run into experts who claim that they can tell I came from Sydney and not from Melbourne. And I have to believe them. But I think it's a long, long while since I sounded particularly Australian. I might be wrong about that.
Is that an attitudinal thing, though, or a sound thing?
They say it's a sound thing. There's a sort of sound shift, especially on words like no. When people from Melbourne say no, it goes no.
And isn't that Adelaide? They go, it's noise thoify. I don't want to go. That's what. Thank you, yoy. It's the oi thing that they do. It's just really weird. But the very first time I flew from Melbourne, I left Melbourne and went to Sydney. I sat next to someone who was a horse urine analyst and had a
horse urine analyst.
She's a fascinating woman.
She was a piss artist.
She's a piss artist, and she I could tell she came from Sydney. I could hear the sound.
She was a horse urine analyst with a Sydney accent.
I've never forgotten her.
Were you, when the moment came, and it came fairly early, didn't it, when you were asked to do movies, and you were pretty solidly involved with stage acting and drama school and so on, was there a conflict for you at all? Well,
not really. I mean, even as a child, like, film didn't grip me, I think. So I'd never sort of really conceived of making films, and my agent about 4 years ago said, you really should make a film, my Australian agent, and I said, well, someone's got to offer me one, otherwise, and Bruce was kind of the first one who did, but I'd been doing mostly theatre, so it just, like, one thing led to another, and I think I was lucky in that I was exposed to a sort of a broad cross-section of actors and directors and cinematographers by working with Bruce. So it just sort of snowballed quite quickly.
How would you rate yourself as a career manager? Let me put a preliminary to that. I should have put it on before I said it. Is that I've noticed through the years that some people are a lot better than others at picking roles, deciding what they do next, and surviving in the business.
Right.
How would you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing?
How would I say I'm doing? Well, I'm having a really good time, which is always a pretty good sign. And I haven't once sort of been, maybe once, but been sort of disappointed at the time of shooting with the choices that
I was sort of sneaking up on that one. There's no way to ask it. Is there anything you've done you really thought, Jesus, that was a mistake?
I've done a stinker. But I'll let you decide which one you think it is.
Okay. I'll think about it for a while.
But it's a very strange thing. I mean, the process of enjoyment as an actor in film is very, very different, I think, from, the experience of working on stage. I mean, it's obviously much more cathartic, both for the audience and the actor, because you can gauge how the evening's going, and also the production can transform itself through the acting, through the ensemble, throughout the course of the run, and of course you don't get that at all. I mean, I've had experience recently on a film where I was doing one thing with a director, and I finally saw the film and thought, wow, I think the impolite way of describing what's just happened to my performance is it's been manipulated, or the polite way of saying it, it's been edited.
You've been screwed.
Yeah, and it wasn't. It's not something that makes me angry at all. But it's a complete other process that happens after you leave it, and you have to learn to let things go. Which is part of the reason why I love doing theatre is that you do with the group of people you're working with, you have it in your hands.
Haven't you got to sometimes let things go before they happen? I'm just hypothesizing here, but suppose I was a great big studio controller in America, and I had this idea for where the Japanese decide to bomb Pearl Harbor all over again, and those planes come sailing in, they drop bombs. Instead of dropping them on Cate Blanchett, they drop them on Cate Blanchett. Yeah? Now suppose I offered you a role. I'm just hypothesizing, and you might decide it's in your interest not to go anywhere near it. In other words, the big project, and people are promising you this will make you millions, it'll give you unlimited opportunities. Have you said no to things like that on that scale?
It's a very strange sort of question to answer, because you sort of feel enormously arrogant, say, well, yes, I have, Clive, several times. But it's the things that you say no to that kind of, at the time, make you feel like shit and you panic. But it also kind of is empowering because you think, well, I don't actually have to take that.
Yeah.
And it depends what you want. I mean, part of the reason why I love Jane Fonda is she's metamorphosed. She's always moving forward.
I think the world of her too. She thoroughly believed in every phase that she's
absolutely
been through. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. And I think if you can have a really strong, I mean, if you have a really big mortgage and 7 children, and you think I need to do this big film in order to, then you've got a reason to do it. But if you haven't really got a reason to do it, then you can't. It's pretty difficult to get up in the morning.
I always thought the most dangerous thing in show business was having to do something because you needed the money, which is the big reason why to keep the money in the bank. The whole Hollywood system used to work on that. They made you rich for a reason. You couldn't afford to. You lived at that standard. You couldn't afford to turn the next movie down.
Yeah.
Now you can make choices. It's a better world. But some of the choices you make, you're actually walking away sometimes from a fortune.
Yeah. But there hasn't,
nerve.
you know, I mean, and that's the thing with a film or with anything really. As an actor, you make the choice, and even if it's the right choice that you feel at the time, and it's a fantastic experience making, it doesn't necessarily mean that the project's going to work. So it's always a risk either way. And sometimes those things that you say, I couldn't possibly go near that. They're extraordinary films, and and you think, well, where was my good taste then? So
what about your own projects? Have you got any thought of building up a portfolio of things you'd like to do and getting them done?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of. I'm wary of. I mean, I love good adaptations of stories and things like that, but I think that more and more novels are being written to be filmed, and so it's a matter of trying to find source material that's not being designed as source material, which is difficult. And also, I've never, well, not thus far, haven't chosen things as vehicles for myself. And so the whole concept of having a production company to find vehicles for myself is quite abhorrent to me. It's more about the project, and also I'm not superstitious, but I'm very kind of fatalistic about work. I just let things take their own course, and I don't sort of like to have my handprints all over things. But obviously there are characters and stories that I find interesting, which I'd love to, to be realised.
In France, they'd have you on stage once a year doing a Racine classic or something, and you'd fit that in with your film career. And I think in many ways it's a bit easier to manage all that on the continent, and it's a bit harder on the international scale that you're working on. But if I was running a theatre company like the National Theatre, I'd do anything to get you playing a big classical role. But the big classical roles aren't really there in the English theatre the way they are in the French theatre. They're not the huge ones.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't do those plays, but it's also the director and the ensemble. I mean, the great thing about the National is they do have that sort of loose ensemble of actors who, you make an 18-month commitment. And, I mean, I feel this as an audience member, and I feel it as an actor, that I can go to a film and be disappointed and then go and have my dinner. But if I go to a play and it disappoints me, I carry it around for months and months and months and months. And it's the same. I mean, I've still got sort of moments which I feel I let myself down, and I let the audience down from like 5 years ago at Belvoir Street. So it's kind of, it takes a long time to let it go. It's a big sort of, it's a longer term commitment you make psychologically, I think, to a play.
Just after the war, long before you were born, Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh arrived in Australia for their big post-war tour. Very big moment. Mm-hmm. And they arrived by aeroplane, which in itself was a very big deal, DC-4 or something. And Olivier was first out of the plane and found himself confronted by an Australian reporter who was halfway up the steps. And the reporter said, "What do you think of Australia?" And Olivier said, "Well, if you just step aside, I'll take a look at it." Now, that happened to every English actor, and every Australian actor, of course, when he's interviewed by an Australian reporter, whether abroad or at home, say, "When are you coming home?" Do you get that?
Yeah, I get it a lot, and it's not something I mind at all, because I mean, I don't sort of think of myself as connected to a country in a flag waving sense, whatever that flag may be.
Interesting question.
But
I like the one we've got, but I think you might have your own new one. Anyway, leave
anyway,
that aside. We'll leave aside that next
so
question.
you've got a bit of a colour theme happening here that's sort of similar to the flag that I've seen a few people wave. So, so what did you ask me?
I forgot what I asked. Oh, yeah.
When am I coming home?
Yeah, the Australian reporters always ask you, even if you've only been away for 10 minutes, when are you coming home? When are you coming home?
I mean, I think that the boundaries between countries in terms of filmmaking are much less distinct than they were sort of even 10, 15 years ago. So, I mean, Charlotte Gray, which I just finished shooting about a month ago, was, directed by Jill Armstrong. Dion Beebe shot it, and the AD crew were mostly Australians, being edited by Nick Bowman, who did Oscar Lucinda with Jill in Australia. And a lot of it's been, done between the two places, shot in England, but yet there's American money in it. And so I think that those people who work undercover in the film industry perhaps don't have to answer that question when you're coming home, because they're a lot less public. And I think it's a thing that you have to be seen as an actor to publicly acknowledge where your roots are. And I think it's the same for British actresses as well. And I think it's because it's that sense that everyone accepts it, but they kind of rile against it about the fact that we're being culturally monopolised, I guess, by American sensibilities.
But it's not true. My own theory is actually quite the opposite. Is Australia is taking over the world, not America.
There's so few of us. Well, it's true. But yet, I mean,
Australia is the new imperialist nation, a cultural imperialism, which is all the more powerful for working without armies. Australia does very well for a country with a tiny population. There's only 20 million of us.
And I think part of it is the fact that people are mobile. And I think it's the distance that encourages people to shift. When Andrew and I've talked about this a lot, about where we'd live and where would you bring up children, and the whole thing about living in New York is that if you grow up at the centre of the universe, then where's the need to move? And I think that there's a healthy thing, which I found anyway in my childhood, that there's a curiosity that's stimulated by the distance, that if you can use that to, not in a way that's embittered or, discontented, but if you can use it in a positive way to help you artistically, it's fantastic, because it just gives you that sort of skewy edge. The distance is, being on the outside, I think, is really good as an artiste.
Yeah, speaking of Andrew and children and all those things you just got mentioned, could I just discreetly bring up the
bubble?
The bubble?
The bubble, you may. Yeah. The bubble is very small.
This is the bubble down.
I think I've made the whole thing up. Yeah.
How does it, shall we say, affect things?
Well, I've got the breasts back that I had at drama school. They sort of disappeared for a few years.
They went missing at drama school.
They went missing.
Did somebody else get them, or they just?
I don't know, but I lost them, and they I'm blushing. They came back, but they've gone down.
I'd like
again.
to make a career out of making you blush. Anyway, they're back.
They're back.
The return of the breast.
But apparently they'll be gone in 6 months. Yeah. So
you think you're going to be that kind of pregnant woman, actually? So just this bit swells up, and then when the baby's gone in.
I don't know. I've been going to these yoga classes for expectant mothers.
We're fairly sure the yogis know something about this, aren't we?
And so I've been doing all the breathing and today the teacher brought in a plastic pelvis with a doll, and was shoving the doll through the plastic pelvis. And I sort of had to lie down. But it's I've been seeing women of all different shapes and sizes. Oh, yeah.
You haven't got the plastic pelvis and the doll of your own. What does she demonstrate with this? I have to know this.
She showed us the tilt of the pelvis and the different positions that the baby can be in.
Well, how does this help you?
Well, it just tells me what's going on internally, what to expect.
You don't have to copy it.
It's all about what to expect. But it's interesting, because a lot of my friends are actually coincidentally pregnant, and we've been talking a lot about active birth and birth without pain assistance. And I'm a great believer, like in everything, that you just don't know what's going to happen, and you've got to roll with the punches. And if you can do it without drugs, fantastic. But if you need them, 20 years ago, the feminists would have been up in arms if there were, anything to assist women in labour to ease their pain, and those weren't being made accessible to us. So I'm sort of a bit...
Epidural can turn out to be a very beautiful word in the right circumstances.
We may call our firstborn epidural.
Well, God on the whole is meant to be compassionate, and you can't be strict about these things. All we can be sure of is a much, much better world to be born into and to give birth than it was once upon a time.
Although not in some countries,
especially the 19th century. Does it? You take liberty and freedom and creativity so much in your stride because you're an Aussie and you're gifted and all that. Do you ever cast your mind to what life would have been like 100 years ago and what your chances would have been?
As a human being, or as
a woman?
Yeah, I'm very stubborn, and
you would have made it stick anyway.
I probably would have tried to, but I mean, it's very easy to sit here and say that. I mean, I think about it a lot.
No, I'm so proud of you and your generation because I'm an older man, and but one of the reasons I'm proud is that you've got something in you that my mother's generation had, and they had life.
The ability to make scones.
Very tough. they could make scones, and they were funny, and life was very, very hard, but they were funny and witty, and they made men glad, and so does your bunch.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Very important, that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a thing, too, of not to be so precious about everything. And I think, I mean, it's the same thing about, the impending birth, is that everything seems to be a little bit too designed towards having the perfect child and creating the perfect moment. And I think film is really obsessed with that.
There are some things you just can't get right. Bringing children up, for example, you've got to accept from the start that you can't get it right all the time, or it won't.
Rarely can you. Yeah. It's the attempt that glorifies.
Speaking of the impendingly born, will he or she be an artiste?
We haven't decided. I have no idea.
Do you get the chance to decide? Did your parents get the chance to decide?
What I was going to do?
That you were going to be an artiste? They thought you were going to be a detective, from what you told me.
Yeah. No,
cycling off into the night with your notebook.
Everyone sort of... I think because I was a bit of a show-off as a child, I'd sort of swing between intense shyness and, running naked through the backyard. Look at me. But...
I'm still doing both those things
yes,
at the
I've
age
heard.
of 61, yeah. That's true.
But they all thought I would, and because I'd sort of defying the labelling thing. If someone tells me that I'm going to do something, I'll probably perversely do the opposite thing. But I didn't chase after it at university. I thought I was going to be, I don't know what I was going to be, an architect at one point, I think. I would have loved to have been, I would have loved to have painted the solitude of that and to actually spend my time looking and transferring and relating in those dimensions would have been, but...
You're still just a kid, you can...
No gift there.
No gift, huh?
I keep saying, all these... This is the problem with being pregnant. I've had this list with about 120 things to do when I'm pregnant. 5 months in, I haven't done any of them. One of them was life drawing. I was going to go back and do some life drawing.
Same here, something I wish I'd always done, because if you don't learn it, you can't do it. And it's...
Well, what's the equivalent for men? Things to do when I'm pregnant. What's the time frame in your life that you have?
Well, for me, it's old age. It's
things to do in my old age.
Things to do in my old age.
We had that too, you see.
So I want to write. I've got poems I've always wanted to write, and in my last decade, I will write them. The trouble is, I don't know when the last decade starts. That's the catch. For all I know, I'm 3/4 of the way into it. I could croak tomorrow, but I think it's that. I think men are concerned about their declining years in a way that women are sometimes think about, well, the next few years are going to be taken up with a biological activity I can't get out of. Yeah.
But I think women are constantly concerned with their declining years. And the declining years, unfortunately, seem to have descended upon women at the age of 21 rather than
Is that the rule?
Is
that a rule of the film business? I mean, people like Meryl Streep and so on have been complaining it is for years, and they fulminate, and I think they're right to fulminate just how short the period is of stardom.
Well, I left drama school when I was 22, and the very first job I got was on a little bit thing on this television series where I had a 15-year-old, I think it was 12 or 15-year-old son, and I sort of thought, what? How is this? And the story made no mention of it. And it's just a given. But I do think that's shifting, and I do think that, no longer are there only do films come out of one place. They're shot like you're doing now. Interviews are shot in so many different ways.
I want to make films here. I would like Liv Ullmann.
What type of films? Liv Ullmann and Liv
Ullmann and you in dialogue that I write, not necessarily in Swedish.
Naked.
Well, I'll be naked, but look what she's done. You see, and she's just turned the rules backwards because she went right through the Hollywood mill. She had these idiot executives telling her that she was too old to be in the Lost Horizon or whatever it was. And now a few decades have gone by. She's buried all those stupid men, and then she's doing important works of art, and you'll do the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think the films that she's directed have been. I mean, they'll stay with me forever.
Not all the important movies are made in Hollywood, but the ones that the world talks about tend to be.
But this is the thing. I mean, the things that, and I'm sure it's the same for you, the things that have deeply influenced you and shifted you and got you through various transitions in your creative life have not been things that you've got from popular culture necessarily. No. And so those things underlie the culture and ultimately cause the shifts and changes.
For me, it was Fellini. I wanted to be Fellini. He's probably not a big name in your generation, but when I was young, he was Fellini's movies, especially 8½. They were unlike anything else. Hollywood couldn't do them. Still,
I mean, they still are unlike anything else, really. I mean, they're a source. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. This first instalment of our many conversations.
Absolutely.
We've covered the world of detection,
surveillance,
plastic pelvises, and there's more to come. And until soon, Kate.
Yes.
Until soon.
Yes.